It all started in 1607 when English settlers established the first permanent colony in Jamestown, Virginia. Over the next decades, the English, as well as other European powers, France, Spain, the Netherlands, began establishing their colonies along the eastern coast of North America. The colonists faced many difficulties, famine, epidemics, and conflicts with the indigenous people. However, despite all these challenges, the population grew steadily. By the middle of the 18th century, the colonies had over 2 million inhabitants, and their growing economic power led them to demand more autonomy from the metropolis. However, England began to impose higher taxes and new restrictions to cover the costs of numerous wars, including the war with France. This resulted in widespread dissatisfaction among the colonists. In 1775, the War for Independence began. The Boston Tea Party, 1773, became a symbol of the colonists' resistance to British rule. 2 years later, on July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress declared independence, with the Declaration of Independence written by Thomas Jefferson. The revolution was not easy, bloody battles were fought, the colonists received support from France and other countries, and the British tried to maintain control over the territory. However, in 1781, after the decisive victory at Yorktown, the war ended, and the United States of America became an independent country. Early years, nation building and the Constitution. After gaining independence, the new country faced a vast array of challenges, creating a government, organizing the economy, and figuring out how the different groups of people would live together. This is where the important work of building the political system of the United States began. In 1787, the U.S. Constitution was adopted, which remains the foundation of the country's political structure today. One of the Constitution's main principles is the system of checks and balances, which prevents any branch of government, executive, legislative, or judicial, from gaining too much power. The Constitution also first proclaimed the importance of human rights and freedoms, which were further cemented by the Bill of Rights, ratified in 1791. The first decades of the new government were difficult. The United States fought wars with Native Americans, sought to expand its territory, and began to form its national identity. Expansion and conflict. In the 19th century, the country began actively expanding its territory. This was the era of a manifest destiny, the belief that the United States was destined to extend its power from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. In 1803, the United States purchased the Louisiana Territory from France, nearly doubling its land area. This allowed for westward expansion and the settling of new lands, but it also increased tensions between the northern and southern states. The southern states, which relied heavily on agriculture, particularly cotton farming, actively used slave labor, while the northern states were moving towards industrialization and opposing slavery. The tension between them grew, ultimately leading to the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. The Civil War and aftermath. The Civil War was the most brutal and devastating chapter in U.S. history. It was a war between the North, Union states, and the South, Confederate states, that lasted 4 years and claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. While the war was rooted in the issue of slavery, there were also economic, political, and social differences between the regions. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared the freedom of enslaved people, marking an important step toward their liberation. The war ended in 1865 with the defeat of the South, and the United States was restored as one nation. After the war, the country faced enormous challenges in rebuilding the southern states, but ultimately, the U.S. became more unified, and slavery was abolished. Industrialization and the rise of global influence. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the United States experienced a period of rapid industrialization. New energy sources, railroads, and mass production revolutionized the economy. At the same time, social tensions grew as working conditions were poor, strikes increased, and there was a growing fight for workers' rights. However, this was also a period of significant scientific and technological achievement, from the telegraph and the telephone to the automobile and the airplane. The wars, particularly World War I, began to change the role of the United States in the world. The United States emerged as one of the world's leading economic and military powers. The Great Depression and World War II. After World War I, the U.S. faced the Great Depression, 1929 to 1939, an economic crisis that shook the country. Unemployment, bankruptcies, and stock market crashes led to massive protests and social unrest. But with Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, the country began to recover, particularly through social programs and government investments. The onset of World War II marked another important phase for the U.S. Although the country initially remained neutral, after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the United States declared war. This conflict became catastrophic for Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, and the U.S. emerged as one of the principal victors, further strengthening its global standing. The Cold War and Modern Period. After World War II, the U.S. entered a new phase, the Cold War with the Soviet Union. This ideological and political struggle lasted nearly 50 years, involving moments of tension, crises, such as the Cuban Missile Crisis, but also periods of cooperation. In recent decades, the United States has experienced a series of significant events, including the Gulf War, the September 11 terrorist attacks in 2001, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the 2008 economic crisis. Today, the United States remains one of the most influential countries in the world, with a developed economy, culture, science, and technology, although it also faces serious challenges, political polarization, social inequalities, and issues with foreign policy. The history of the United States is a story of struggle, change, and the pursuit of a better future, and undoubtedly, it will continue to unfold.